The Russians acquired their furs primarily from indigenous Siberian nations, who were forced to provide a regular tribute of valuable animal skins to their nearest Ostrog. This extortion racket, known as yasak, put immense strain on traditional indigenous lifestyles, to say nothing of the violence that would be inflicted upon them if they failed to deliver. Like the Cossacks, Russian...
Right. How Russia conquered
a young colonial nation, advancing thousands of miles across a massive continental landmass, utilizing their superior firepower to subdue and marginalize disease-ravaged native communities on their march to the Pacific Ocean. This is a story most commonly associated with the United States and its genocide of the Native Americans.
Oh my god!
Across the freezing waters of the Bering...
Oh my gosh. First time you hear kings and generals call out something bad that America did, guys. Wow. Striking. Holy crap.
See, a somewhat similar tale was taking place. A tale which has made Russia the largest country on Earth. Today, we will highlight an often overlooked chapter in the history of colonialism, recounting a sordid saga of conquest and genocide across the endless taiga and frigid tundra. Welcome to our video on the Russian conquest of Siberia.
Every week we release 3 new exclusive videos.
Skip this sponsor, man. Skip it.
Sprawling across a mind-boggling 13 million square kilometers of taiga, marshes, mountains, and frigid tundra, the region of Siberia is the northernmost section of the Asian continent, comprising 77% of Russia's total landmass and stretching over 17% of the Earth's total surface. Siberia's unforgiving northern climes are some of the coldest places on Earth, and is, consequently, among the most sparsely populated places on the planet. Despite this, Siberia has been home to a remarkable display of human diversity since time immemorial, hosting dozens of native nations who spoke dozens of unique and wildly divergent languages.
Yeah, a lot of
culture and customs among the diverse Siberian peoples varied significantly from nation to nation, but most of them lived a nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyle, centered around the herding of domesticated reindeer, which provided crucial meat, milk, and fur, as well as transportation across the rugged, snowy terrain. Religiously speaking, the native Siberians mainly practiced different forms of animism, relying on shamans to communicate on their behalf with the spirits that dwelled in the rivers, trees, and sky. Despite its remoteness,
I'm pretty sure, yeah, Native Americans be doing that too, bruh. Yeah, it's crazy. So the culture is like still the same somewhat. Because Native Americans are people from Siberia who simply went across the Bering Strait when it was still connected to Asia. Freaking hell. So hard to pronounce.
Siberia was never isolated from the outside world. Over the millennia, several groups of conquering horse archers from the Great Eurasian Steppe rode forth and mastered the region, including the Scythians, the Turkic Khanate, and the Mongols of Genghis Khan. The main resource that drew outside empires into Siberia, despite its incredibly hostile climate, was its furs. Far northern mammalian species native to Siberia, such as lynx, sables, and Arctic foxes, possessed thick, soft, and luscious pelts, which were as luxurious as they were practical in cold weather. By the time of the Mongol Empire, Siberian furs had become a symbol of nobility across Asia. Ultimately, extremely lucrative fur trade, which eventually brought Siberia into the crosshairs of its current European occupier. For centuries before there even was a Russia, The ancestors of the Russian people were aware of the vast Siberian landmass directly to their east. Long before the rise of a tsardom in Moscow, the medieval Slavic principality of Novgorod had begun probing beyond the Urals in search of lucrative animal pelts. Driven by a lust for furs, Novgorodian explorers began venturing into western Siberia along the river Ob as early as...
Yeah, I do know that when the Tsars expanded into Siberia, they were particularly like interested in that fur. That's why I heard. But yeah, I didn't even know that like that fur was known to the ancestors of the freaking Russians way before Russia even existed.
The 11th century CE. They named these eastern frontier lands the Land of the Yugor, with Yugor being a blanket term applied over several West Siberian indigenous tribes, such as the Khanate, Mansi, Komi, and the Samoyeds. Early Novgorodian expeditions into Siberia often took the form of violent attempts at forcing the natives into providing tribute in furs, setting the tone for the Russian Empire's expansion into the region in later centuries. Armed with sturdy spears and longbows and armored in chainmail, the Uralic warriors of Siberia annihilated several Novgorodian expeditions and, although paying tribute at times, managed to avoid total subjugation. The true conquest of Siberia would only begin in the 16th century, after the formation of the Tsardom of Russia. In 1480, the Grand Duchy of Moscow threw off the last vestiges of Mongol overlordship, before embarking on a series of military campaigns that brought Novgorod and all the other princedoms of northern Rus under their rule. In 1547, the infamous Ivan IV.
Okay, let me talk about this for a second. You know something that's hilarious to me? I hear people say, no more brother wars, blah, 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 blah. Referring to Russia and Ukraine. Oh, we're brothers. Oh, we shouldn't be fighting. Bro, I laugh at that. Now, war is bad. I'm not saying not. But I laugh at that simply because Rus people have been fighting each other since the Rus principalities have been around. Like, are we not forgetting that Novgorod had to be conquered by Moscow? And Moscow just eventually just conquer all the other Rus principalities? Like, bruh. Life was not sunshine and rainbows in these times, and it still isn't. It's like how English people, like how did England unite, right? You had all these Germanic people who went to Britannia, and they went and set up their unique kingdoms in Britannia, and they fought a whole bunch of wars with each other. Okay, it wasn't sunshine and rainbows. No, they were fighting so much wars between one another until eventually one of them conquered the rest and would form England. And now we see English people today who are all together living in harmony, who all say, yeah, I'm English. I'm a proud English person. But before there was even the England, you had all of these freaking small kingdoms on Britannia fighting each other. None of them had no sense of common heritage or identity. None of that, bro. It wasn't until after one of those kingdoms had to conquer everybody else that identity really started taking shape, frankly speaking. So, I mean, it's the same thing too, where Prussia did the same thing. Prussia had to conquer its way to unite Germany, right? Many German states fought each other. So saying, oh, we're brothers, that's comical to me.
The terrible elevated his standing among the rulers of Europe by giving himself the imperial title of Tsar. Fueled by a hunger for regional supremacy, the Imperial Russian state inaugurated the first 10 years of its existence by conquering the Turco-Mongol Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, thereby annexing the entire Volga region and opening the way to the Ural Mountains and the wealth of precious furs that lay beyond them. As the Russians set their sights eastwards, they met eyes with a powerful new rival. Known for being the northernmost Islamic state in recorded history, the Khanate of Sibir was founded in 1468 by Kipchak Turks, fleeing the destructive clan warfare of the declining Golden Horde.
Build a website you...
I just want to point out something too before I unpause. Let's not forget that the Mongol Empire was a colonial empire that literally conquered its way through. And a lot of these states and principalities are literally just consequences of Mongol colonization. Why am I saying this? Because people say, oh, Russia colonized this, Russia colonized that, blah, 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 blah. But do you realize that the Russians were, well, their ancestors were colonized first? In fact, it's because of that even like led to that notion of we need to expand or we're gonna be conquered again, like what happened to our ancestors during the freaking Tatar yoke period. This is one of the main reasons why Russia even expanded in the first place, to protect itself. It's funny how people ignore that. The Rus people were the ones conquered first. They were the ones who were subjugated first. They weren't the first ones to do that. So a large part of why Russia even expanded was to prevent that from ever happening again. That's why whenever people look at me and tell me, oh, but Russia's a colonial empire, Russia expanded too, I'm like, yeah, I know. But when you actually look at the reason why Russia expanded, it's a lot different from, say, like a lot of these other Western European powers. Like Britain. Why did Britain go and colonize the world? Money, trade. The British Empire was a trade empire. That was the goal. What was the goal of the French Empire? The goal of the French Empire was to quite literally make any and everyone French. So, again, etc., right? Different colonial empires had different reasons for why they expanded. It's funny how he does not mention that at all. He just talks about the fur, which, don't get me wrong, the Tsars did want the fur. That's true. That is very true. It was lucrative. That's true. But I would say the main reason why Russia expanded is because Russia wanted to protect itself after her ancestors were literally subjugated and basically colonized by the Mongols. And also, Russia has bad geography too. So Russia couldn't even like Russia constantly is under threat from invasion, literally, had Russia not expanded.
Despite their remoteness from the rest of the Muslim world, the Khanate of Sibir was no cultural backwater. Grand mosques were built within its fortress settlements, while extensive cultural and commercial ties were established with grand Islamic centers in Central Asia, such as Bukhara and Samarkand. After witnessing the Russian conquests of Kazan and Astrakhan, the Siberian Khan Yermak made the pragmatic move of acknowledging himself as a vassal of Russia and promising to pay a yearly tribute of 1,000 sable skins. However, Yermak Khan was deposed by a dynastic rival named Kuchum in 1573. Reversing his predecessor's policy, Kuchum reneged the Siberian Khanate's vassalage to Moscow. This turn of events necessitated a powerful response from Moscow. But Russia was presently occupied with waging the grueling Livonian War, and did not have the military resources to spare for a punitive expedition into Siberia. To that end, Ivan the Terrible turned to the Stroganovs, a family of merchant lords with extensive lands on Russia's eastern frontier, providing them with a license to raise a private army and claim lands east of the Urals. Eager for this opportunity to expand their family domains, the Stroganovs hired a Cossack bandit named Yermak to invade the Siberian Khanate on their behalf. As a vagabond with a price on his head, the outlaw accepted the job offer in exchange for a pardon. In 1581, Yermak began his voyage into the depths of Siberia.
Vagabond. It's interesting how you pronounce that word. The way how I pronounce it is vagabond. That's how Barbadians would pronounce that, vagabond. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced vagabond, not vagabond. I didn't even recognize that word because the way how you pronounce it. Yo, crazy thing about that, right? I remember when I first started learning Russian, actually, and I heard that you need to have the correct stress pronounced in words. Otherwise, you wouldn't be understood. And I was like, what? How does that make any sense? Until I myself started seeing examples of this in English where people would pronounce words differently from how I'm accustomed to hearing it. And I'm like, what are you saying, my boy? Literally how he said vagabond, and it took me a second to realize the actual word vagabond. That's how I'm accustomed to hearing. I'm like, that's when I was like, okay, now I get why that's a very strict rule in Russian that you need to pronounce the right stress in words.
Area, along the Tagil and Tura rivers with a band of 1,636 men. Armed with muskets, against an enemy with no gunpowder weaponry of their own, Yermak's Cossacks blasted their way into the Khan's capital before routing a Siberian force several times their size at the 3-day bloody Battle of Chuvash Cape. It took another decade to fully pacify regional pockets of resistance, but the Yermak expedition ultimately resulted in the total annexation of the Khanate of Sibir into the Tsardom of Russia. Following the dismantlement of the Khanate of Sibir, the Russians continued on an interminable eastward march. Driven by the pursuit for ever more sources of valuable furs, they struggled through thousands of kilometers of impenetrable taiga forests, marshes, mountains, and tundra into the fully unknown lands of central and eastern Siberia.
I'm gonna tell you something about Russian colonization, right? Russian colonization was so tamed. It's funny how, do you hear the way how he's talking? It's like, bro. Oh my gosh. Dude. Okay, I want y'all to just, I'm gonna replay it and I just want y'all to hear. He's trying so hard to make this seem like it was such a brutal, grueling, vicious, absolutely awful thing that Russia did. Just pay attention, guys. Just
Driven by the pursuit for ever more sources of valuable furs, they struggled through thousands of kilometers of impenetrable taiga forests, marshes, mountains, and tundra into the fully unknown lands of central and eastern Siberia.
Bruh, they're really wanting that fur, bruh. Oh, yeah. Blasted their way just for that fur. Also, we're like 10 minutes into the video and like zero mention of what I said earlier, by the way. Like the main reason why Russia expanded, which was because Russia's geography is terrible. And Russia, had she not expanded, would be under threat of being subjugated again. I need to remind people of this. Russia expanded in response to being subjugated, or I should say, of her ancestors being subjugated by foreign powers. Need I remind you guys, the Mongol Empire was a foreign entity that literally subjugated indigenous people because the Rus people were literally indigenous to the regions that they're still in to this day, right? And because of this scar, the Tatar yoke period, Russians realized that they needed to expand or risk someone else conquering them entirely, because the Mongols just subjugated them and vassalized them and somewhat colonized them too, somewhat. But somebody else could be different. Somebody else could just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna straight up annex all of y'all this time, right? So this is why whenever I hear people say Russia's expansionist power, they act like if Russia, as soon as Russia was born, or Russia's ancestors, like as soon as Russia's ancestors came around, they just went about just conquering people the moment they were born. Not really. Not really. Russia really doesn't care about other foreign people. Russia only cares about itself. Like, actually. Like, the modern Russian Federation itself, too, hasn't really engaged in any, like, foreign conquest of anything. Like, look at Georgia. It could have annexed Georgia. It didn't annex Georgia. It went 13 days and left. Chechnya. Chechnya was an illegal breakaway state. Chechnya was an illegal breakaway state that didn't even properly succeed from the Russian Federation during the collapse of the Soviet Union. So under international law, Russia had every right to retake Chechnya because it didn't follow the proper protocols to leave. It just simply declared independence. You can't do that, number one. Okay, the same thing happened with Armenia and Azerbaijan, where Artsakh didn't follow proper international protocol and it simply just declared independence. Yes, morally speaking, did Artsakh have a moral claim to not be a part of Azerbaijan? Yes, but it didn't follow the proper legal protocols. So, under international law, Azerbaijan had the right to retake Artsakh, which it did. I see nobody saying, Azerbaijan likes to conquer people. Nobody says that, okay? I mean, really, man. Yeah. And there's no other example of Russia doing anything in foreign countries. I can't even think of anything. It was just those two wars and that was that. Oh, but the current conflict that's going on in Ukraine, guys, if you looked at the Russian advance the first 2 weeks of the war, they weren't even like advancing to take territory. They were advancing just to go depose the illegal government in Kiev, because the government is illegal. I already explained this in one of my Ukraine conflict reactions. I went in full details on why that government is illegal. Ever since 2014, the government was illegally deposed. That is a fact. Ukrainians themselves don't even deny this. So I'm not gonna go into details on why that's there. I already explained. Yanukovych went to Russia. He asked Russia to help him. So, yeah. They weren't even like trying to conquer anything in Ukraine. They were just going straight for Kiev to depose the government. That was that. Oh, but what about the territories that they just annexed? The territories that they just annexed wanted nothing to do with Ukraine anymore after the government was illegally deposed, guys. Since the government is illegally deposed, why should those territories follow an illegitimate government? I mean, at that point, it's just free real estate. It's like these people voted for Yanukovych and he was just completely removed unfairly. That's not fair to them. Why should they go and follow people that they never voted for? So they wanted nothing more to do with Ukraine after that, and they wanted everything to do with Russia. That's why I don't care about Russia annexing those territories, because that's what they want. That is a fact, not an opinion, number one. Number two, those territories were literally Russian territory anyways. So you can't even say that either. And even if Yanukovych would have simply became president again and he would have ratified Russia annexing those territories regardless. Literally. So
the Russian exploration of Siberia was carried out not by a professional state army, but by hired Cossack mercenaries. The Cossacks were autonomous military societies from the ungovernable borderlands between the Polish and Russian empires, along the Don and...
What? You hear what he said? You hear what he said? You heard what he said? You hear that? You hear that? Let's replay that again, guys. Let's replay that again.
Societies from the ungovernable borderlands between the Polish and
You hear that? Ungovernable borderlands between Russia and Poland. Yeah, Ukrainians like to base their freaking identity off of these guys, when Cossacks literally could have been any and everyone. And there's no special name to Ukraine. It literally just means freaking borderland. I'm a borderlandian, brah. Oh gosh, this sounds so stupid.
Russian empires along the Don and Dnieper rivers.
Guys, fun fact, I talked to a Don Cossack person before. Well, she was like half Russian, half Chinese. I saw a Don Cossack person. Well, not really saw, but like talked to one. And very interesting. She looked more Chinese than Russian though, but she swears on Jesus she's Russian, even though she looks extremely Chinese. But she's like half Russian. And she really tries everything to preserve traditional Russian culture and stray away from that whole modernity that is taking over the world, including Russia. Very interesting to talk to her. I asked her, give me some insight on what's life like in Russia. Yeah, she did give me some insights on what life is like in Russia and what to expect when I go to Russia. She gave me her brutally honest opinion from her perspective. She said there's usually attacks on minorities from like, I'm pretty sure she said like, if you don't look like Slavic white or something like that, like attacks that happen to those type of people, it's very common, and the police don't do anything. These are her words, not mine. She said, white supremacist marches are very common, and the government permits it. Again, her words, not mine. She said the government permits it. You can't really protest about anything else. She talked about how prices are increasing as well. And how it's a lot of stuff, to be honest. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, shit, that's gonna take too long to... She sent me like a whole... I'm talking, like, I would have to grab my phone and list everything that she said. That would be too long, guys. And honestly, it's like 1 a.m. So I'll talk about that more. But yeah, that was some of the things that she told me. I was like, okay. She also didn't mention the whole conflict with Ukraine, but I'm like, man, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's gonna eventually end, and people will move on, blah blah blah. So
regularly rejected the authority of Moscow, electing their own leaders and following their own laws. The Cossacks' refusal to submit to the full control of the Tsar was a constant frustration to Russia. Their skill in soldiering and laws. The Cossacks' refusal to submit to the full control of the Tsar was a constant frustration to Russia. But their skill in soldiering and adaptability in rugged terrain made them extremely versatile mercenaries. Unburdened by any semblance of military discipline, the Cossacks in Siberia conducted themselves as packs of vicious blackguards, living out their cruelest fantasies upon their victims. Given no pay by the state, they were encouraged to earn their profits with plunder extracted from indigenous Siberians, further incentivizing their brutal extortion, massacre, and enslavement of native peoples. Throughout the...
So, wait a minute. Ukrainians love to call themselves Cossacks, right? So if I use Ukrainian logic, these Ukrainian people here are committing all of these atrocities and atrocious acts. Oh my god, guys, show this to every single Ukrainian person. Man, Cossack, look at me, I'm a Cossack. Oh wow, so that's the legacy of Ukrainians right here, committing atrocious acts against native people, extorting and enslaving them. I'm just saying, if we use Ukrainian logic, I'm not saying that's true or not. I'm just saying if we use Ukrainian logic, guys. Okay?
Early 17th century, the Cossacks continued their ferocious eastward push, conquering new territories around the size of the modern-day Netherlands with each passing year. Native nations such as the Selkups, Tungus, and Yakuts.
Bro, a lot of this was literally, unironically, just them taking a sign, putting it down, and that's that. Siberia was just so uninhabited that a lot of wars had happened, but it wasn't really like on a big ass scale. Like there were like the Ket people. There were the Ket people. I know who they are. The Ket people. They were brutally like wiped by the Cossacks and Tsar's army. I know about them. But all in all, overall, still though, it was mostly tame. Let me read this.
Were soon placed under the Tsarist boot, unable to mount an effective resistance against the Russian onslaught. The most superficial reason for this was that the Cossacks had guns and the natives did not, but this was only part of the story. At the beginning of the 17th century, the population of the Tsardom of Russia was around 10 million. In contrast, the population of Siberia was probably no more than 300,000. Divided.
Bruh, yeah, exactly. Exactly, goes back to what I was saying. Siberia is just so largely unpopulated that really and truly these people were just walking into empty wasteland 90% of the time, bruh. Like,
among dozens of different languages and cultures and dispersed across a landmass 54 times larger than Britain. Moreover, the conquest of Siberia also resulted in the spread of diseases, which native peoples had no prior immunity to. Smallpox alone reaped a macabre harvest, tragically wiping out over 80% of the Tungus and Yakut population.
What?
When all these
so basically they had their own version of what happened when the Europeans arrived at the New World, which is interesting because they had connection to the Old World. Wow.
Factors are stacked together, it is hard not to notice the striking parallels between Russia's conquest of their Wild East and the United States' conquest of their Wild West. As two sides of the same imperialist coin, both nations spread the same germs to their respective native populations before exploiting the same advantages to push their way across their respective continental landmasses to the Pacific Ocean. As the Cossacks carved a bloody swath through the taiga, a deluge of colonists followed in their wake.
So basically, most of these, a lot of them died before they even were able to set their sights on a Russian person, Cossack or whoever. Interesting. Yeah, this is so tame, honestly. As much as he's like trying to gas it up, all in all, this is very tame, honestly. Like,
by the beginning of the 18th century, Russian settlers had already made up over 50% of Siberia's total population, a percentage which would only increase as mass migration intensified in later centuries. Settler colonialism in Siberia was clustered around a network of ostrogs, wooden fortresses built on the banks of Siberia's mighty rivers to exert power over the surrounding native peoples. The majority of Russian settlers in Siberia were peasants. Many others were criminals, political dissidents, and prisoners of war who had been sent into exile, thereby inaugurating a long-standing Russian tradition of Siberian deportations, which would continue until the time of Stalin. The Russian Orthodox Church followed the Russian state into Siberia, where its clergy were horrified to witness the rapacious character of the Cossacks and the heathen ways of the natives. Orthodox priests attempted to civilize the rowdy Cossacks and convert the pagans, largely to no avail. The Cossacks continued to drink, brawl, and plunder, while the natives embraced Christianity only superficially, continuing to practice their animist traditions when the priests turned their eyes elsewhere. Although the Russians successfully introduced agriculture to Siberia, the colonized region was still dominated by the incredibly lucrative fur trade. Today, a brand-name coat of sable fur can cost upwards of $20,000. The price tag was even higher back in the 17th century, when a single sable pelt in good condition sold for over 10 times what a peasant family earned in a year. By the end of the 17th century, the Siberian fur trade had gone global, tapping into markets in Western Europe, Persia, China, and beyond. The wealth of this trade fueled Russia's wars in Europe, such as when Tsar Peter the Great declared a state monopoly on sable furs to fund the astronomically expensive Great Northern War against Sweden and Poland-Lithuania. The Russians acquired their furs primarily from indigenous Siberian nations, who were forced to provide a regular tribute of valuable animal skins to their nearest ostrog. This extortion racket, known as yasak, put immense strain on traditional indigenous lifestyles, to say nothing of the violence that would be inflicted upon them if they failed to deliver. Like the Cossacks, Russian frontier governors were not paid by the government.
Basically, a reverse of what the Mongols did to the... It's literally a reverse of what the Mongols did to Russia's ancestors. Extorted them. Bruh. Which is funny, because these people were all a part of the Mongol Empire. And they went and extorted the Rus people. And then the Rus people, the Russians, of course, went and now are extorting them. Oh my goodness. This is why I'm like largely, I feel indifferent about this. Now, I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but I'm just saying it happened to the Russians first anyways. And they're essentially doing it. Now, obviously, they're not all the same people, but they were all a part of the Mongol Empire. And the thing about the Mongol Empire is that the Mongol Empire, whenever it annexes places, it like incorporate everyone. Like, we all should know that. The Mongols would incorporate everyone and be like, okay, you are a part of us if they directly annexed you, right? That was one of the reasons why the Mongol Empire was so successful at expanding, was the fact that it decided to just incorporate and assimilate people, right, into Mongol culture, traditions, etc., or adopting their traditions. So a lot of these people, because the Mongols didn't annex the Rus people. No. The Mongols were just extorting the Rus people for tribute. So a lot of these people were in on this, bro. Who are over here, a lot of these people were in on it. I'm just saying, you gotta keep that in your mind. I'm just objectively speaking here, bruh.
And were expected
I'm not saying two wrongs make a right,
nourish
but I'm just saying, just keep that in
themselves
mind.
of what could be extracted.
That's just how things were back then, right? Notice how nobody complains about what the Mongols did. Nobody complains about what the Mongols did to the Rus people. How the Mongols completely extorted them. Nobody complains about that. So why is it different when the Russians do it? I mean, I'm just saying, keep the same energy.
From the natives, further increasing fur quotas and exacerbating indigenous exploitation at colonial hands. The mistreatment of the Aboriginals occurred not just at the hands of government officials, but independent trappers as well. At the height of the Siberian fur trade, thousands of peasants looking to strike it big on sable pelts left their farms and became independent fur hunters, known as promyshleniki. When these trappers failed to bag their own pelts, they terrorized the natives into providing for them. Promyshleniki fortune seekers regularly kidnapped indigenous women and children, holding them hostage and selling them back to their men for a sable pelt apiece.
Wow.
Imagine being
As
able
Russia pushed deeper and deeper into Asia, it soon found itself bumping up against the most powerful empire in the world, the Qing dynasty of China. After conquering the Ming dynasty in 1644, the Manchu emperors of the Qing began expanding northwards into the outer reaches of Mongolia and the Amur River region, putting them on a collision course with Russia. The Qing made for a formidable enemy. Far removed from the small, disease-ravaged communities the Cossacks had been slicing through, the Manchus possessed a huge and professional gunpowder army. In 1685, a Qing force of 6,000 men and 100 cannon destroyed the crucial Russian ostrog of Albazin on the Amur River. The Russians rebuilt the fortress the next year, and this time managed to hold out against an invading force 10 times their size.
Wow.
Thereafter, representatives of both powers finally convened to draw a satisfactory border between their respective empires. The result was the 1689 Treaty of Nerchinsk, in which Russia was forced to abandon the Albazin Ostrog and cede the left bank of the Amur River, while the Qing relinquished its claims towards the lands around Lake Baikal. With the China issue squared away, the Russians began exploring the Pacific coast around the Kamchatka Peninsula. The indigenous nations of this wild and extraordinarily remote country were the Koryaks, Itelmens, and Chukchis, ancient peoples who had lived in eastern Siberia since the Ice Age and who bore prehistoric cultural links to the ancestors of the Native Americans that had crossed the ice bridge into North America over 10,000 years ago. According to Russian accounts, the Koryaks, Itelmens, and Chukchis stood out among other Siberian peoples for their warlike ferocity. They fought in thick lamellar armor made of whale skin, reinforced with bone and antler plates.
What the heck?
Constantly raiding one another with the aim of carrying off slaves and reindeer herds. Despite their bellicosity,
but everyone was literally doing this to each other, bro. It's like, dude, it's just how time was back then. We see the indigenous people raiding each other, extorting each other. It's literally just survival to the fittest on a whole different level, quite literally, man.
the natives of the Siberian Far East were subjugated by the Cossacks after 1697. who exploited the natural divisions among them to subdue their fractious clans one by one. Thereafter, the Cossacks imposed the Yasak on the natives and enslaved the women and children of any clans who failed to meet the fur quota. This inhumane treatment served only to unite formerly warring clans together against the Russian menace. By 1706, most of the Chukchis, Koryaks, and Itelmens had erupted into open rebellion. The natives took Cossack ostrogs by surprise, burning down the forts and seizing the muskets within, which they learned how to operate remarkably quickly. By 1729, the Russian war effort had been taken over by the remarkably barbaric Major Dmitry Pavlutsky, who utilized terror tactics to bring the Aboriginals to their knees, presiding over the mass slaughters and enslavement of Chukchi women and children. By 1741, the Itelmens had been largely subdued.
I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. A lot of this stuff, it doesn't really seem like Russian. It seems kind of wrong to say Russian. A lot of, because Cossacks were distinct. I view Cossacks as distinct people. Like, you have to say your average, regular Russian person, Russian soldier. But Cossacks were a whole other level of just unique. Cossacks were usually criminals, lawless people from any and everywhere. He is saying the term Cossack. Now, don't get me wrong. Yes, are they under the Tsar's umbrella? Yes, they're affiliated under the Tsar's. But a lot of these tactics and stuff has nothing to do with the Tsar. It's just that the Cossacks themselves are just kind of just brutal in nature. To just label that Russian is a bit inaccurate to me. I'm just saying, just pointing that out.
But many Koryaks and Chukchis still defied the authority of Russia. Over 6,000 kilometers away, in distant St. Petersburg, the Senate of Empress Catherine ordered the total extirpation of the Koryak and Chukchi people, demanding their complete ethnic cleansing from their native lands. Yet, the Koryaks and Chukchis refused to disappear. They savaged themselves upon the Russians, even capturing and beheading the reviled Major Pavlovsky.
The Russians waged war, but some Chukchis survived these extermination plans in the Russian Empire. Yeah, you can't subdue. This is just too remote of a region. This is just too remote of a region. Like, good luck trying to subjugate that.
Lutsky in 1747. Eventually worn down by ceaseless Russian aggression and a smallpox epidemic that had reduced their population by half, the Koryaks finally submitted to the Russian crown in 1757. Despite this, the Russians had been forced to abandon their plans to commit genocide on the Koryaks, which had been made impractical due to their feral resistance. The Chukchis, however, were never fully subdued. Despite Russian claims in the 18th century that all of Siberia had been conquered, the Chukchis never paid the Yasak tribute. Their territory in the Arctic Circle was simply too remote to hold, so long as its native population remained warlike and determined.
Yeah,
the Chukchis did not accept.
That's the thing. Whenever I saw like a map of Russia, I'm like, how does Russia hold those remote regions? I'm like, there's absolutely no way Russia can hold those like remote regions like that. Yeah, makes sense.
Accept de facto Russian overlordship until after the revolution of 1917, making them the only Siberian people to never be conquered by the empire of the Tsars. By the 18th century, Russia had subdued the vast majority of North Asia. And in doing so,
I was about to say, what about these people?
had become the largest contiguous land empire on Earth. Further acquisitions continued for another 200 years. The regions of Amur, Tuva, and Outer Manchuria were seized from a now weakened Qing dynasty China after 1858, as was the island of Sakhalin, which was split between Russia and the rapidly rising Empire of Japan. There, yet more native people, such as the Nivkas and Oroks, suffered heavily under a Cossack onslaught. Pressed by the Japanese from the south and Russians to the north, the Ainu people of Hokkaido, Sakhalin, and the Kuril Islands faced colonization from two sides. Today, the indigenous peoples of Siberia only make up around 5% of the region's population, with the rest being overwhelmingly ethnic Russian. Major cities such as Omsk, Novosibirsk, and Vladivostok cement Russia's permanent presence in the land beyond the Urals, now connected to Moscow and St. Petersburg via the Trans-Siberian Railway.
Ooh,
Nevertheless,
yeah, I'm gonna visit Vladivostok when I go to Russia. Yeah, I'm gonna visit Vladivostok. I'm not really particularly interested in visiting Moscow. St. Petersburg, I'll visit St. Petersburg, but Vladivostok, yeah, that is one of my first places I'm gonna go to when I either Vladivostok or St. Petersburg. Is gonna be my first stop. Moscow or probably. It depends. It depends. Like, or maybe I'll visit all three cities when I get to Russia. Because I would have to. I have a month of being allowed of Russia with my Barbadian passport via e-visa. I'm not gonna go right now, but I'm not gonna go right now because I want to have a normal experience. And due to the whole conflict in Ukraine, people are just way too heightened, too much like paranoia, you know, a whole bunch of confusion. I just want to go when it's normal, just have a normal experience. Otherwise, I could literally just honestly go get a flight ticket, buy e-visa, and literally just go to Russia right now. Funny enough, my friend came back from Russia like 2 weeks ago, I think. Was it 2 weeks ago? A couple of weeks ago? I don't know. I think it was like a couple of weeks ago or some shit. I don't know. Point is, she showed me pictures. Pretty cool. She's actually gonna move there. But the thing with her is she's like half Russian. So half Russian. So she's like, yeah, I visit Russia constantly. But she grew up in a completely different country though. She did not grow up in Russia. No. That girl has a very interesting story. But anyways. Yeah, guys. If you made it all the way here, I will tell you this. I am very close. Very close. Closer than you think. I say this all the time, that I spend like 5 hours a day, 5 to 8 hours a day teaching myself how to speak Russian. And you might be wondering, well, how's that doing? Because I haven't really brought that up in a long time. Well, if you follow my TikTok, which I don't really mention my TikTok, I do have a pro-Russia TikTok where I basically openly meet right in Russia. But I don't really mention it on this channel because I don't really care. I honestly do that TikTok for fun. I mentioned it like once, never again. But if you did follow that TikTok, you would see that I do talk about my Russian learning a bit there. I'm actually quite close to learning Russian, actually. Yeah, closer than you think. Very close. Like, super close. A couple of months ago, I said that at the end of 2025, I would be B1. It's still on track to that point. Yeah, it's still on track to that point. Okay, I've learned most of Russian grammar. Not all of it. I would say I learned like 80% of Russian grammar. I didn't understand the logic behind it. The other 20%, I've seen it, but I haven't dabbled in it a lot. But it's not really like perplexing to me, so I'm not like meh. But yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's like it's only a matter of time now, before I'm like really comfortable, and it's like very close, super close. You have like very, very close, guys. Like every single week. You might be saying, well, why don't you go and speak Russian right now? Just because I'm saving it for a video. I'm saving all that for a video. Okay, I'm saving all that for a video. Okay, you guys gotta wait. Surprise. Well, no, that's not true. I posted myself speaking Russian like once on my YouTube short. I don't know if y'all saw that or not. Because somebody on my TikTok was like, "Oh, you're a black person. You don't even know how to speak Russian, and you want to talk about Russian, Ukrainian being the same." So I was like, no. I don't like to tell people that I can speak Russian, but I can honestly, like, where I am right now, I can probably communicate 60% of what I want to say. 60%, maybe 70% of what I want to say to people. But it would have clear grammatical mistakes. The sentence structure would be a bit wonky, but you would still understand what I'm getting across. Like, it wouldn't be like horrible per se. It would just be a bit funky, if that makes sense. That's like my Russian level. I am advanced A2, very close to B1 level. Very, very close to B1 level, guys. But anyways, if you made it all the way here, you have more Russian videos that you would like to see my reaction to, you could comment it in the comments below. Eventually I will do it, guys. Go check out my other Russia reactions like this on my channel. Funny enough, actually, before I went and recorded this video, I spent a whole hour studying Russian, and then as soon as I was done with that hour, I immediately went and started recording this video. But anyways, make sure to like and subscribe if you like my reactions, if you like what I have to say. If you want to see more Russia reactions, and you know, a couple years from now, you want to see my Russia vlog, because yeah, that's gonna come, guys. Believe me, that's gonna come. That's gonna come. That's gonna be fun. But anyways, yeah, thank you for watching. Once again, subscribe, like, drop your suggestions to me in the comments below, and goodbye.